This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to this episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon here on the Mitch Marathon month, which has felt like Mitch Marathon half a year. But I do have good news. You know, if you do like the Mitch merch and the t-shirts, yes, loudtracks.com/Mitch, I have commissioned an official Mitch or Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon guitar pick. Yes, they will be coming in shortly. In fact, I'm going to use them as my business card, I think. But hey, if anybody wants a Mitch guitar pick, please let me know. And on the last episode, I with Steve Riley of LA Guns, we discussed the LA Guns Wasted EP. And I know if you've tried to find that or looked on eBay, you will see the CD being sold for $50, $80. I think I saw it once for like $192 or something. Anyway, listen, I, as you heard, had financed that CD, and I have a bunch of them sitting here in a box and unused, unopened, perfect condition. Anyway, if anybody wants a LA Guns Wasted EP, straight from the manufacturer's box, or a Tracy Guns Killing Machine CD, which I also had a hand in, just write me at let me rephrase that. Write me at mitchminute@aol.com, mitchminute@aol.com, which is also the PayPal, and we'll arrange a price. Now, I've shipped a bunch of CDs for the Kiss tribute across the world. To Canada to buy an envelope, a padded envelope, blah, blah, blah. And it's about $8 to send it to the States. It's about $10, and to send it worldwide is about $12. And then we'll figure out a price for the CD, and I'll ship those out. In fact, you know what, the CDs, I just, $10, so if you want to just get an LA Guns Wasted EP, throw in $10 plus shipping to cover wherever in the world you are. Send me the PayPal money to mitchminute@aol.com, and I will get them out. Now, I am going to be on the road for the next little bit, so there might be a delay of 3 or 4 or 5 days before they get shipped out, but they'll get shipped out, and they are official. Anyway, let us talk about today's guest. It is Gary Pihl of Sammy Hagar's band and Boston, but he also has another band called Alliance, and they have a new album out called Fire and Grace. And how can you not love a guitarist who played on Sammy Hagar's greatest song from the VOA album? I know what you're thinking. That's right. Dick in the Dirt. Oh, you weren't thinking that one? You were thinking I Can't Drive 55? That is good. Not Dick in the Dirt. I mean, it's no Dick in the Dirt. I love the title of that song. Anyway, Fire and Grace by Alliance is available now, and it is what you expect it to be, a fun rock album. Listen, I have a passion for music. It's very hard for me to find something I don't like. I generally like all music. I love the thrill of listening to something. Anyway, before we get over to Gary, I've never done this before, but I want to read you some of the Billboard box scores, because the numbers, and that's the reporting on concert attendance and stuff. Let's look at some of these. These are the most recent ones available, and normally they give you like the top 50 concerts in a reporting week or whatever, but the Rolling Stones played Soldier Field in Chicago on June 21st and 25th, and they grossed $21,741,000. Top ticket price was $499.50, and the capacity over those 2 dates was 98,228, and they filled in 98,228 seats. Unbelievable. Here's a band with almost 60 years career, but this is where it gets amazing, because number 2, Rolling Stones, Gillette Stadium, July 7th, 11 million gross, 49,669 sold, capacity 49, sold out. Again, 60 years career. Third on the list, Rolling Stones. FedEx Field, Landover, Maryland, July 3rd, 9.2 million gross, 39,082 tickets sold, capacity, blah, blah, blah. Number 4 on the list, another person with almost 60 years career. Paul McCartney, T-Mobile Arena, Las Vegas, June 28th and 29th, 7.2 million, 29,822. And I'm not going to bother reading capacity because the numbers are sold out. Number 5 on the list this week, Paul McCartney, Lambeau Field, Green Bay, Wisconsin, June 8th, 6.5 million, 49,416, sold out. Number 6 on the list is Paul McCartney, Arlington, Texas, June 14th, 6.3 million, 45,024. Number 7, guess what? Another dude with 60 years career. Oh, wait, still Paul McCartney at Petco Park in San Diego, June 22nd, 6.1 million, 40,224. Number 8, a band with almost 50 years career. Aerosmith, Park Theater, Las Vegas, June 19th, 22nd, 24th, 27th, 29th. 5 dates, 5.2 million. Number 9, Aerosmith, Park Theater, Las Vegas, July 2nd, 4th, 7th, and 9th, 4.1 million. So it is 2019, and in this reporting week, 9 of the top 10 shows are bands that have 50 years or more career. That is remarkable. Number 10 and number 11, Ariana Grande, and then guess what? Right back to the oldsters. Number 12, Elton John. Number 13, Elton John. 14, Elton John. 15, Paul McCartney. 16, Elton John. 17, Rod Stewart. 18, Rod Stewart. 19, Elton John. 20, Elton John. Elton John. Rod Stewart. I mean, holy mackerel. Some might say rock is dead, but I'm thinking maybe just bad rock is dead, because good rock, like the Rod Stewarts and the Elton Johns and the Aerosmiths and the Paul McCartneys and the Rolling Stones, all are peaking the needle at 50 or 60 years of career, and they take up, let me just back this up a second, they take up almost all of the spots in the top 30. Almost all. Couple Ariana Grande, but everything else is the old folks. It's remarkable. Anyway, you can head over to billboard.com/biz, B-I-Z, or Z, /current dash box score, and you can check those out. Just save the page on your browser, because it is amazing what you will see and who's doing what. It's just completely spectacular. Anyway, there you go, folks. Let's get over to Gary Pihl of Boston and Sammy Hagar fame. New album by Alliance is out now, called Fire and Grace. Do check that out. And without further ado, here is the one, the only, Gary Pihl. We're speaking with Gary Pihl, of course, of Boston, Sammy Hagar fame, and Alliance. And the band has a new album out called Fire and Grace, featuring, of course, Robert Barry and David Lauser as well. Gary, an absolute pleasure to talk to you. We're going to speak Alliance and then maybe look back at some of the other stuff you've been a member of or part of over the years.
Well, Mitch, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so let's get straight into Alliance here. The new album is out. It is on Spotify and all the services. You can get physical product. It sounds great. The last album, Road to Heaven, was 2008. So let's just start there. What was sort of the genesis of getting this new product put together and saying, hey, you know what? We've done the Boston stuff. We've done this. Robert's done. Let's get back together and make a new Alliance record. Talk to me about sort of getting this one put together.
Yeah. Well, as you pointed out, yeah, it's been a long time since the last one. And over the course of these years, we've all, of course, been writing songs and coming up with ideas. But instead of just sending them back and forth through email, which is easy to do these days, we only like to record when we're all together in the same room. And call us old school, if you will, but for us, that's where the magic happens. And just the title song itself, Fire and Grace, is a good example of that. I had a guitar riff idea. Dave had a cool drum beat, and Robert said, I got some lyrics that might fit with that. We hit the record button, played that, just started playing what we had, and wrote that 4-minute song in 4 minutes. And so, again, that's the fun part about being in a band and working with guys that you trust, because you know that they're not just trying to play my part, like, here, do it my way. It's like, no, what's going to make this song sound the best? Sometimes the drummer, Dave, will say, well, strum the guitar kind of like this, or whatever. And it's like, well, wait a minute, the drummer's telling me how to play guitar? But it's okay, because I know that he's got some good idea, and I do it, So anyway, that's the fun part about working with those guys.
It really is. Talk to me a little bit quickly about Alan Fitzgerald. He, of course, was part of the band at the beginning, had some great moments with Night Ranger. When people think about Night Ranger and what, they think Jeff Watson and they think Alan. Talk to me a little bit about having worked with him, and did he participate at all on this album, or did he sit this one out?
Yeah, I'm afraid he sat this one out. He's like semi-retired now. He'd been on the road so long, as you say, with Night Ranger. And, of course, I met him as the keyboard player for Sammy Hagar. Before that, he was the bass player in Montrose. So he's got a very long career. As of late, he'd been out playing keys either on or off stage with a bunch of people. Van Halen, Bruce Springsteen, what's his name, Dan Fogelberg. So, yeah, he's been working all this time. And so he was saying, I'd love to work on the record with you guys, but, I'm taking some time off. But I hope if we do some live gigs that we'll talk him into coming back out of retirement and doing that with us. But, we miss him. But Robert is such a great keyboard player that we're moving on without Fitz.
So let's talk about the writing process for this album. Because there are these albums that were done in the past and it had a very specific sound, but we are 2019. Coming into this, do you look back at the past discography and say, okay, we need to write another album that has that sound and have an alliance sound? Or do you come into 2019 thinking, hey, you know what? We are going to make or 2018, I guess, when it started. How do you sort of approach the songwriting, and who is the main, if you want, songwriter in the band?
Robert certainly is the most prolific, but Dave wrote a couple songs, and I wrote a couple. And as I say, Fire and Grace was written by all three of us on the spot. But yeah, Robert is definitely the go-to guy. He's got always has lots of great ideas. But as far as the style of the band and the style of the sound, it's something that we've developed. And, of course, as I look back at the first couple of albums way back, it's like, well, we were kind of searching for our sound, but I think we really hit it on the last record, Road to Heaven. And so this time around, it's like, okay, now we know who we are, what we're going to do. Let's take it a notch higher. And, again, I play guitar in the band Boston, and I love that guitar sound for Boston. But for Alliance, I want people to listen to us and say, wow, that sounds like Gary Pihl in Alliance. I don't want them to say, oh, it sounds like Boston. That's already been done, So to that end, I built my own tube amplifier so that nobody else in the world will have that sound, good or bad. That's what I used on this record. So for me, that was the start of it. It's like, okay, now I've really got my sound. This is it. Nobody else sounds like this. And so I took that, again, to our recordings, and I hope that shows up as like, wow, it's now even better than it was. As you say, songwriting is one thing, like how do you approach it? But sound, for me, is where I want to start with. And that inspires me to write songs and to contribute to the other guys' sounds and songs, too.
That's interesting because... First of all, I didn't realize that you built your own stuff for your own sound, because we all know about the Rockman, right?
Sure.
And what Tom does. It's interesting that two guys in Boston are sort of gearheads in a sense. So talk to me about creating. How do you sort of create your own thing? Like, talk to me about that a little bit. I'm curious to know about how do you come up with your own design? Do you work with a team? Is it you and Tom? Well, explain that to me, because I actually didn't realize that you did this.
Well, again, when I joined Sammy's band back in '77, almost one of the first tours we went on was the end of Boston's first tour, and for their first album, and they liked us and we liked them, and they said, "Hey, you guys should open the entire second tour for us." And that's just what we did all across the country. We were the opening act, and so of course Tom's got this amazing guitar sound, and I was always kind of electronic geek. I took electronics in high school, and I was the guy when your amp would break down or your cord would be frayed. It's like, "Oh, well, give it to Gary; he'll solder it for you." So I was always that guy. So when I saw Tom and all his stuff, I was the guy that would say, "Hey, Tom, how do you get that sound? What's this thing here? What does that work? How does that work? What's this over here?" And he was nice enough to show me what he was working on, and I even helped him demonstrate some of his products. He started his own company, the Rockman company, and he would go to these trade shows for music merchandisers, and so he needed somebody to demonstrate some of this stuff. So I actually did that for him, even when I was still in Sammy's band. So he and I definitely have that electronics bond between us. And I worked at Tom's company when I joined the band as well, working on products there. And again, it was all stuff that we were going to use on stage, which we do. So yeah, Tom designed the amps that we use on stage today. So again, I've always had that. And so for me, I wanted to, again, do my own thing, be a little different, get my own sound. And so I really enjoy tube technology. That's pretty old school stuff, but to me it sounds great. And so that's what I did. That was my approach.
Oh, that sounds great. So talk to me a little bit as we get away from. Actually, I don't want to get away from Alliance just yet. You did an album in. What was it, 2017, All 41, that also had Robert Berry and Matt Starr, who has played with Ace Frehley and Mr. Big these days. Yeah. How was that album, or how was that project different than Alliance? Or simply put, why wasn't that an Alliance record?
The folks at Frontiers Records contacted me and asked me if I would like to do an outside project outside of Boston, because Boston's last album was on Frontiers Records. And so I said, "Well, sure, what do you got in mind?" And they said, "Well, they listed a whole bunch of names, and we went through to find out who was available and that sort of thing. And they came up with Matt Starr and Terry Brock as a vocalist, and they were looking for a bass player. And I said, "Well, Robert Berry, how about him? Let's get him." And Robert has his own solo albums on Frontiers, and so, of course, they know him very well. I said, "Oh, okay, great, we'll get him." And that was the type of band where the folks from Frontiers had a staff writer there who sent us all songs that he had written, and we, went to whatever studio situation we all have, because I've got a little studio in my place, and Robert's got a terrific studio there out in California, and we all contributed our tracks individually. So we never met to do that album. As it happened, they asked us if we wanted to contribute some songs. And again, Robert had a couple and I had a couple. And so those ended up on that record as well. But again, we never even met until it was time to do the video for the first song. And we all met in L.A. at the video place. And as we were playing along with the video, of course, just lip syncing, we're actually playing. The drummer is actually hitting the drums, and I'm actually playing the guitar, and Robert the bass, and Terry's singing. And we kind of looked at each other and say, "Gosh, we could actually do this. We could go do a gig. We know these songs." And of course, the other guys are such great musicians. And so we even talked about that, like, gosh, how can we, go out on the road just and put this out there? But again, everybody else is so busy, it's tough to do.
It really is. And I love Frontiers, and Alessandro is a great writer, but sometimes I look at these projects they put together and I go, well, why don't you just get Gary and Robert to write? You know, they anyway, whatever. Let's not badmouth Frontiers, but Alessandro's a terrific guy. But let me get over here to musical chairs with Sammy Hagar, and of course Alan's there, and Denny Carmassi, incredible player. Talk to me about that. Were you joining? Did you believe that you were joining a band, or was it always very clear that this is a Sammy Hagar solo project and you're just going to be the guitar guy? What was sort of the pitch made to you as you came into the fold?
It was obvious that it was Sammy's band. You know, he's the songwriter, and again, it's the Sammy Hagar band. It's not, you know, a band name, you know, like the ABC band or something. It's Sammy Hagar. So I knew what the setup was going into it. But that said, as I was, you know, working with him, as he would come up with song ideas, and we'd all be, you know, sitting around jamming on them and coming up with parts, it was completely open to all of us to do whatever you think is going to make the song sound good. And so there was no restrictions like, well, you know, this is my band, I want you to play it this way, or here's where I'm coming from. Nothing like that at all. It's like, hey, just do whatever you feel like doing. So, and I should say that's exactly the same way that Tom Scholz approached us as well. That when we're working on his songs in the studio, we're free to do whatever we want with them.
Yeah. So let me get, and I'll get away from Sammy in a second, but let's talk about this VOA album.
Okay.
Absolutely. You know, essential listening for rock fans. It comes out in 1984. You've got Van Halen's producer, Ted Templeman, on it. Of course, it has I Can't Drive 55, which becomes the ubiquitous Sammy Hagar single. Talk to me about putting that album together and becoming really the sound behind Sammy, because when we look back at it, you look at the band and you go, yeah, that's the band. And of course, you've got David Lauser, who's on there, who, of course, is on the Alliance record. Talk to me about being that band, the VOA band, and that album, and how important it was.
I got to say, people ask me sometimes, what's it like working with Sammy? And I say, what you see is what you get. He's always in a good mood, fantastic musician, and he's your best friend. You meet him and shake hands, and then 10 minutes later, he's like hugging you. Okay, take care, see you later, you know. Like you're friends with him. So he made working in that band, again, a real band project, even though his name was on it. And so, as you say, I was with the band 8 years. And when we started off, we were not very well known. His name was not very well known. We'd go down south, and people would say, oh, yeah, Sammy Hagar. He's one of the Hagar twins from Hee Haw, right? And we'd say, no, he was in the band called Montrose, which, again, wasn't a household name either. But every year it kept getting better, and he was our cheerleader. You know, next year is going to be even better, and it was. And so, as you say, by the time we got to 1984, we've got songs on MTV and platinum records, and we're headlining our own shows in big arenas, and yeah, we felt like we're on top of the world. And going into make VOA, and we got Ted Templeman, and that was one thing that we always felt we lacked in the studio, was that we thought we were a better live band than we were able to capture in the studio. And so we thought, oh, well, now we got it. Ted Templeman's going to be the producer. You know, he knows how to get a great rock sound. And so we were very thrilled having him there. And again, every year kept getting better, and I thought that was like the best iteration of the band right there, too. So when Sammy got the call to join Van Halen, he said, oh, man, you guys are like the best band I've ever worked with. You should just find some other singer and plug him in and keep going, you know. And that's when Geffen Records, our label, told us about Robert Barry, because he had worked with Keith Emerson and Carl Palmer on Geffen Records. And we had called him up, but then I got the call from Tom Scholz to come back to Boston to work on the Third Stage album. And so, again, I jumped at that after, again, being the opening act for Tom. So I'd gotten to know him all those years, and thought he was a great guy. And so I kind of jumped ship on the guys. But after the Third Stage album and tour, Tom came to us and said, now, it's going to be a while between now and the next Boston album, So if anybody has any other projects you want to do, go ahead. Now's the time to do it. So I called up Alan Fitzgerald and David Lauser, and I said, hey, let's get together and do something. And Lauser remembered Robert Barry. So he said, let's call that guy. So we actually all met in Sammy's recording studio and showing each other our ideas. And Robert just fit in like he was our long-lost brother. You know, we were all on the same page musically, the same influences and sounds and bands we liked. And here we are still together.
Yeah, all these years later. So then, you know, if the relationship goes back so far, why not more alliance? Why not more tours? What has sort of kept the band from being more active?
That's exactly it, because we're all in other bands. With Boston, usually we had only toured when we had a new record. So back in the, you know, obviously 76, that record, then 78, but then the next record, The Third Stage, didn't come out till 86. You know, that was 8 years later. And the next one was another 6 years after that. So back in those times, yeah, I had time on my hands, but I was working actually at Scholz Research, the Rockman company with Tom, so I was busy doing that. And then in the 90s, once we finally got Alliance together, then I started working more with Boston. In fact, we just did 4 years in a row, 2014, 15, 16, 17, and the band hadn't worked that much since the 70s. So that really kept me, you know, out of the way and doing that. So I just didn't have the time to again, work on any Alliance stuff.
Okay, so let me ask you about working. In that period when you were working, you bring in Michael Sweet of, I'm blanking on Michael. Stryper. Yeah. And the worst part is that Michael and I are friends. We actually text each other. I forgot the name of it. He's going to hate me when he hears this. But yes, talk to me about bringing in Michael from Stryper, because he's got a very, very pure voice. How did that go? Was there an audition period, or did you just say, hey, I know this guy who lives, you know, down on Cape Cod here who sings really great? How did that sort of come about?
Well, as you know, our original singer, Brad Delp, took his own life in 2007. And at that point, Tom, you know, was saying, gosh, I don't know if we'll ever perform again. I mean, he was such a terrific singer and, you know, part of the Boston sound. I don't know if we could go on without him or not. But some folks wanted to put together a tribute concert for Brad. And so, of course, you know, Tom says, yeah, sure, we'll be glad to play. And we gathered up all the previous band members that had been in Boston and some other local bands to play on the show. And once the word got out that we were doing this, we got calls from people to say, hey, I'd like to help out. Actually, Sammy Hagar was going to come out, but then he got busy doing something else. And anyway, some other friends of ours that had known Brad along the way wanted to come help. And one of those was Michael Sweet. So he called and said, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll just play guitar, sing backup, you know, whatever you want me to do. But I want to be there, you know, as a tribute to Brad. And so we said, okay, great. And somebody found Tommy DiCarlo because of his MySpace page. Tommy had been a fan of the band and did some like karaoke singing, you know, along with Boston tracks, and put it on MySpace. And somebody saw it and said, wow, this guy's a great singer. Check him out. So, you know, we did. We saw him and said, wow, he sounds really good. Let's ask him if he wants to do the tribute show as well. So as we found out, Tommy had never been in a band in his life. And so I'm sure when, whoever it was that called him up said, okay, this is Boston. We want you to come out and play with us. He probably thought, Bobby, is this you? Who is this really calling me? You know, but no, it's really Boston. We want you to come out and sing with us here at this show. And he came up, and of course he was fantastic. And our management saw the show, and they said, you know, you guys should just continue on with Michael Sweet and Tommy DiCarlo, the two of them. And that's what we did. 2008, we went out with both those guys, and they kind of traded vocal duties. And you're right, Michael doesn't sound like Brad, but Tommy does. So between the two of them, they got a great blend together, and it turned out to be a great tour for us.
Out of respect, I didn't want to broach the whole Brad subject, but what an incredible singer, and just want to pay respect to him because he just really was an incredible talent, just an incredible talent.
And you can imagine how devastated we were. And my theory is that we were rehearsing for a tribute show in 2000, at the end of 2006, for Doug Flutie, the football player. I don't know if you know much about him.
Yes, of course I do. He played in the Canadian Football League after he did his Patriots little stint.
Exactly. Anyway, but he's a Boston guy, right? So anyway, there was going to be a Doug Flutie Day celebration, whatever and at Symphony Hall. And they were going to, give him an award and tribute. And he's also made a lot of contributions to autism because one of his sons has autism. So he's, community leader and philanthropist and the whole thing. And they had asked him, what sort of band do you want to play? And he said, well, Boston, of course, And as it turns out, Doug even plays drums, and he sat in on a song with us at his own show. But where was I going with this?
Just that we love football. No, we were talking about Brad and
oh, Brad. Okay, so I'm sorry, I get carried away here. So we were rehearsing for that show, and one day Brad comes into rehearsal, and his little finger is like bandaged up. He's got bandage around it, and I said, "Oh, Brad, what happened?" And he said, "Oh man, I got in a motorcycle accident, and I knew he had a bike." And he said, I wasn't even going fast. It was like 20 miles an hour. I was coming up to a stop sign, slowing down. There were some wet leaves on the ground. I hit him. The bike went out from underneath me. Next thing I know, I wake up in the hospital. So he had obviously had a concussion. He said it cracked his helmet. So, man, thank goodness he had a helmet. But, how hard was that he cracked his helmet? So back then, we just figured, oh, well, that happens. You got your bell rung and, whatever, and now you're fine. Just like we thought about NFL football players. But now they're finding out unfortunately, all these football players that have had concussions, you're 10 times more likely to commit suicide if you've had a concussion. And it, for whatever reason, they still don't really understand, but it definitely changes your brain. And so that's why they're so careful about that these days. But again, at that time, nobody really knew about it. And again, he had his little finger bandaged up and figured, oh, no problem, keep going. But yeah, 3 months later, he took his own life, which was exactly the same thing that happened with the singer from In Excess. He had, somehow tripped and fell or something and hit his head on the concrete. 3 months later, took his own life. And again, football players have done the same sort of thing. So we know better now, but at the time, we had no idea.
Yeah, and it was just both Michael Hutchence and Brad were just devastating news, especially as rock fans. You hear anyway. Let me just quickly, and I'm going to move away, but I mean respectfully, not to brush it aside. But Third Stage, the album. Yeah. I had just finished high school. It comes out the year after, and at that time, on MTV and Much Music in Canada, I was like, wow, this band that had done More Than a Feeling, that had disappeared, are back. And then the single Amanda is everywhere. Incredible song, by the way. Talk to me about going into the studio for that one, because you were gone forever. You are joining the band now. There are expectations that we're going to get more Than a Feeling Part 2 and Part 3 and Part 4. MTV now exists, and you're going to be all over there, hopefully. What was it like going into that, knowing that you had to live up to one of the greatest singles that was ever made? You hadn't been around. There was new guys in the band. Just talk to me a little bit about that whole and how it sort of came together. Yeah.
Well, again, because I had kept in touch with Tom, as I say, over the years that I got involved with his electronic stuff, and when he'd heard, again, that Sammy was leaving the band to join Van Halen, he called me and asked me to play on the last song to be recorded for the Third Stage album. It was I Think I Like It. Everything else had been recorded up to then, and so he said, yeah, I got one more song. would you come back here and help me finish it up? And of course I said, yeah, absolutely. So I left from our last gig with Sammy, which was Farm Aid 1 out in Champaign, Illinois, and flew directly from there to Boston to start working with Tom and Brad on this last song. And after I'd been there for, a couple of weeks, Tom said, gee, I think we work well together. Why don't you move back here? We'll finish this record. We'll go on tour if people want us to. Because, again, you're right. It'd been 8 years. And like Andy Warhol said, sometimes you're only entitled to 15 minutes of fame. So Tom had no idea if we would still have fans. I mean, think about yourself. You're talking about high school and all that. And if you were in junior high when More Than a Feeling came out, now you're like out of college. You got a job or something. This complete different stage of life, for you during those 8 years. So he had no idea if anybody would still care about Boston. But you're right. Amanda was such a terrific song. It went to number one. The album went to number one. The tour was fantastic. We set records, like 9 shows in Boston and 4 at the Meadowlands in New York. It was terrific. So, but we had no idea.
Okay, so let me ask you this then: with the single and all that, and the heat, for the lack of a better word, that you got, why did the band disappear again for another 8 years? Why was there not an album in 1987 and in 1989 and in 1991? Why did we sort of become sort of like, the gopher or the, Punxsutawney Phil who pops up his head? And, why not say, okay, well, we did the impossible. We climbed the mountain again. Now let's stay on top of this darn mountain.
Yeah. Tom is not a fast songwriter, and that's the reason. He is very thorough in the studio, and it's not that he's slow, but he wants to hear, like all the options and the permutations of song ideas. And so as he's told me, again, I've been in the studio working with him, and he's fast. I mean, like when we lay that stuff down, it's like quick. He knows his way around the studio, of course, and we get stuff done quickly. But it's a long germination process of him coming up with the ideas. And sometimes he has said that he'll work on a song for 6 months and then throw it away. It's like, no, it just doesn't sound right. Well, again, the last album I did with Sammy Hagar, we recorded that in 12 days. So, it was just not the norm to think, okay, you're going to take years to make a record. But that was Tom's mindset. He said, I'm going to take my time and do this right. He had always said that the first album took 6 years to write and record, and that he felt rushed to come up with the second album. Of course, they had been on the road for so much of that time and didn't have a lot of time in the studio to actually record that second album. So when he did that, he said, that's it. I'm going to take my time and make records at my own pace until I'm happy with them. And, maybe they would have been perfect 2 years ago. I don't know, but whatever. I'm going to take my time and do it right.
Well, hey, listen, it's been working. And the last album, Life, Love, and Hope, 2013, which means that somewhere around 2021, we should have a new Boston album every 8 years, give or take. Well, it's been 6 years. Is there more in the pipeline? And also, since I'm in Canada and I'm in Montreal, the LP bonus track was O Canada. Talk to me about, just quickly, why did we choose O Canada as a bonus track? And thank you for that, because it's a great anthem. But where are we going with Boston in terms of new music?
Yeah, Tom always has great, cool riffs and ideas, and so I'm sure there'll be another Boston album at some point. But no official word as to when that may be. But yeah, he's always thinking of stuff, and we really enjoy playing in Canada. We've got lots of friends up there, and we had done, Tom had come up with an arrangement to do the Star Spangled Banner. 1 year for 4th of July, he had this idea to do this, and went in the studio and recorded that very just instrumentally, no vocals, right? And so when we were doing Canada, some Canadian shows, somebody mentioned along the way, gee, do you guys ever think about doing "Oh Canada?" And Tom said, that would be great. Let's do that. So again, he came up with the arrangement to do it. And boy, I tell you, when we play that in Canada, people stand up, and I get choked up just thinking about it. It's just such a great thing. It's wonderful to do. It
is, and hey, if folks haven't heard it, go get the LP. You get that as a bonus track. Of course, Alliance, Fire and Grace is out now. Gary, just an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And I'm going to finish with this. One last question, and I'm going to go Sammy Hagar on you. But just looking back at the albums and the catalog that you made with Sammy, just how good of a band were you, and sort of what's sort of your fondest memory of that time? Because you can't deny that you have made or contributed to some of the greatest rock, or at this point, I guess, classic rock, right? I mean, right? But just talk to me about that band, because, yes, you said before, it said Sammy Hagar on the marquee. We know that. But we also know that we actually had a band. Yeah.
And, of course, Sammy brought along his bassist from Montrose, Bill Church. And actually, I'll go back a little history there. I was in a club band in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we had heard that Sammy had left Montrose, and our band was looking for a singer, and we called him up. And he said, well, I've got some guys I'm working up as a band. I don't really, I don't want to join anybody else, but can I do some gigs with you? And so we actually had him open a couple of shows for us as he was putting his band together. And again, we had never found a singer, so our manager said, gee, why don't you, join Sammy's band? And I said, well, he's been through about a half a dozen guitar players in 6 months. I mean, if I join him, he'd just kick me out in a couple of weeks, too. What's the point, He said, well, why don't you give him a call? And so I was talking to him, and he said, and I particularly tell this story to young musicians and say, how'd you get that first break in Sammy Hagar's band? And I said, well, so I called him up, and he said, Pihl, hey, are you into drugs? I said, well, no, why? And he said, well, the last guitar player I had OD'd in the bathroom of a gas station. Oh, man, sorry to hear that. He said, so why don't you come down and jam with us? And so I go down to jam/audition and playing the stuff, and Sammy's manager called and said, hey, there was a gig with Queen and Thin Lizzy. Queen had to cancel. Thin Lizzy's going to headline. You guys could be the opening act if you have a guitar player. So, of course, Sammy turns around to me and says, hey, can you be ready in 2 days? And I said, oh, yeah, sure. So, of course, I went home and practiced as hard as I could and did the show, and we actually got some nice reviews for that show. But I just felt, so good about being in that band. But I thought, well, that's it. I mean, they just, hired me to fill in. So I was saying goodbye at the end of the show, and thanks a lot. And Bill said, no, you're in the band. That's it. So that was a dream come true for me. And, yeah, I'll never forget that show and that moment. And the other guys were so, again, helpful about how to interpret the songs, to get me up to speed. And we just all became great friends. And so you're right. I think that was a fantastic band, and it evolved a bit. We lost Fitz along the way. He joined Night Ranger. We had Chuck Ruff, who was in the Edgar Winter Band, and Denny Carmassi, as you said, and then Dave Lauser. So we went through a few guys, but they were always terrific guys and musicians. And again, we were all sorry to see it end there in '85.
Yeah, that must. Okay, well, I lied. Let me ask you just quickly about that. When Sammy goes and joins Van Halen, and we sort of touched upon it before, but were you expecting him to come back? Were you expecting Van Halen to take off? Because fans, when you lose a guy like David Lee Roth, you can't just replace him. You have to get something. And man, did they ever luck out with Sammy? It worked, and that was 1,000,001 shot that it would work, because you can't just replace some guy. But when you got the call and said, hey, was it devastating? Was it like, well, okay, we sort of expected it? Or was it joy? Like, hey, Sammy deserves it, man. How did you sort of take that news?
Well, you're right. It was all of those, all of the above. So, yeah, as I say, Sammy was our cheerleader, right? He said, yeah, next year's going to be even better. And And it was. Every year was better for us. And right up to 85, he said, 86 is going to be fantastic. And again, we had platinum records and songs on MTV, and we were, thought we were going to be on top of the world, So when he said, I got this offer I can't refuse, yes, you're right. On one hand, it's like, oh man, we were pretty close to being, a top band, and but on the other hand, you're so glad for your friend Sammy that he's got this great opportunity. So you got to be happy for him. And again, he was such a friend of ours that's the way we took it. It's not like a boss where you guys are fired, I'm getting somebody else or whatever. That's just not the way he was. So yeah, we were happy for him, a little concerned about our own future, but the fact that he, tried to hook us up with other singers like Robert Berry through Geffen Records, showed that he wanted to take care of us, wanted to make sure that we were okay in other groups. And actually our keyboard player at the time, Jesse Harms, went on to play with David Lee Roth, of all things. And then he also did a gig with REO Speedwagon for a while, too. And Dave Lauser, our drummer, had some other studio session stuff, and Sammy used them on other sessions. And then, of course, once Sammy left Van Halen, he got Dave Lauser back on drums, and that part's history, too.
And how close were you ever close, by the way, to joining Night Ranger? Because you did those demos for Dawn Patrol and Midnight Madness at your home studio, if I'm not mistaken. Was there any point where you were going to be a Night Ranger?
No.
Okay.
Again, I met the Night Ranger guys through Fitz, and actually Ronnie Montrose. He had known some of the guys, and some of them were in a band called Stereo. And Ronnie said, gee, these guys, need to do some demos. And Ronnie had been at my house, in my home recording studio, with Mitchell Froom, who I had played with in Crossfire. Mitchell, of course, went on to be a terrific producer. Paul McCartney and Los Lobos and Sheryl Crow and on and on and on. Anyway, we were in that band together. And so Ronnie said, yeah, I know you got some recording stuff at your place. Check these guys out. I think they're really good. And Fitz wasn't even in the band at the time, but then, it's a small world. Again, we're in the San Francisco Bay Area. Fitz joins, and so, again, they asked, well, gee, can we do some demos at your place? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I helped them record a bunch of songs, one of which was Sister Christian, and they got the record deal, and, of course, I was thrilled for them. But, yeah, I was still playing in Sammy's band, so I was busy.
You had a gig? Wow.
Yeah, I had a gig. And, of course, Jeff Watson and Brad Gillis were terrific guitar players, so they deserved their shot at fame, too.
But you didn't actually play on any of the music that came out. You helped with the demos. Did you play on those demos or help write any of them? I mean, other than Sister Christian, did you? How involved were you in those early Ranger demos?
Yeah, I'm surprised you knew that. Yeah, their original name was Ranger.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I was just the engineer. That's all. And again, they were recorded those in my living room in my house.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And anyway, well, thank you for your time. And it's just amazing to look at how you went on to be in Boston, and Sammy got to be Sammy, and Van Halen, and Night Ranger with Alan. It's. Boy, you were in a great musical space growing up, or living it whenever that was. But
yeah, well, again, I've been very lucky to be at the right place in the right time. And yeah, if you would have told me and Sammy in '83, said, okay, next year you're going to join Van Halen and you're going to join Boston, we would have said, yeah, right. What are the odds of that happening? But there you go. Life is strange sometimes.
It is. And folks, again, Alliance, Fire and Grace is out now, came out in May, and do go check it out. And as we say in Montreal, Gary, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely. Cheers.
See you, Mitch.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
You're listening to Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Rock Talk.